You think you've won, don't you? The words echoed from the grainy video, Ryan's smirk curling through the screen like a shadow. I've still got cards to play, and when the media gets a hold of what I have, your precious reputation will be in tatters? David sat frozen at his desk, the USB drive still warm in his hand. A betrayal from the man he once called his best friend now threatened to destroy everything: his company, his name, and the future he had built. And yet in the darkest hour, hope came from the most unexpected place: a quiet voice, a courageous waitress, who refused to stay silent. This is not just a story about business betrayal or ambition. This is a story about trust, resilience, and how a single act of courage can change the course of someone's life forever. If you're ready for a journey of emotion, redemption, and quiet heroism, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Shining Stories. Let's begin. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Branwell & Co., a high-end cafe nestled in the heart of the city. Dressed in crisp navy and calm confidence, Ethan Ward took in the quiet buzz of conversation and clinking porcelain. Today marked a turning point. He and his oldest friend Lucas Hart were hours away from finalizing a deal that would elevate their tech firm to national prominence. This is it, Ethan murmured to himself, standing from the table. Restroom break, be right back. Lucas barely looked up from his phone, nodding absently. Across the room, Clara Monroe, a 23-year-old server with quiet eyes and calloused hands, moved through her shift as she always did, unnoticed. She never lingered, never spoke more than necessary. But as she neared Lucas's table with a water pitcher, his low voice caught her attention. She has no idea he was saying into his phone. Once it's signed, I control everything. Ethan won't see it coming, it's all in motion. Clara froze. The ice in the pitcher shifted as her grip tightened. She took a slow step back, heart thudding. The man across from her wasn't joking. He was betraying his best friend, planning to steal everything they had built. She hurried to the back kitchen, her mind racing. She didn't know Ethan. She was just the help. It wasn't her place. But could she really walk away, knowing what she knew? When Ethan returned, cheerful and unaware, Lucas greeted him with the same ease he always had. Clara watched from behind the espresso counter, fists clenched. Her chest ached with dread. As Lucas stepped outside to take another call, Clara made a choice. She stepped forward, nerves shaking. "Sir," she said quietly, stopping beside Ethan's table. He looked up, puzzled. "I know this sounds strange, but something's not right. About your partner. And you need to know." Clara stood by Ethan's table, her heart hammering so loudly she could hardly hear her own voice. "Excuse me, sir," she said, barely above a whisper. Ethan looked up, surprised. It was unusual for a server to approach him so directly. "Yes." She hesitated just for a second, then pushed the words out. "I overheard something. Something. I think you need to know." Her eyes flicked to the glass door where Lucas stood outside, still on his call. Ethan frowned, uncertain. "What do you mean?" Clara took a breath. "Your friend?" "Lucas, he's not who you think he is. I heard him. He said once the deal is signed, everything becomes his. The company, the assets. You'd be left with nothing." The words landed like cold water. Ethan blinked. "I'm sorry, what I know, it sounds impossible," Clara said quickly. "But I heard him say it. I wouldn't have come to you if I wasn't sure. I couldn't let you sign that contract without knowing." For a moment, Ethan just stared at her. His first instinct was to laugh it off. Lucas had been his best friend since they were teenagers. They had built everything together. Betrayal was unthinkable. But something in Clara's voice, the trembling sincerity of it, made him pause. "You're certain?" he asked quietly. "Now I am." She said, "I wish I wasn't." He leaned back in his chair, trying to process the storm unraveling inside him. Lucas, the friend he trusted with everything, could really be planning to take it all. "Thank you," Ethan said, his voice low, "for telling me." Clara gave a small nod and slipped away, leaving him alone at the table. The deal contract still waiting in front of him, suddenly feeling heavier than ever. A moment later, the door swung open. Lucas walked back in smiling as if nothing had happened. Ethan studied him closely now, the ease in his step, the calm in his face, the very same man he had once called brother. And yet Clara's words rang again in his ears. He's going to take everything. "Everything all right?" Lucas asked, settling back into his seat and taking a sip of water. Ethan forced a smile. "Yeah," he said, steadying his voice. "Just thinking through the final details." Lucas nodded, tapping the table. "Big moment. We've worked a long time for this." Ethan looked down at the document spread in front of him, the contract they had both dreamed of. But now he wasn't sure who he was sitting across from, and he knew one thing. He couldn't move forward without the truth. Ethan sat still, the contract in front of him untouched, while Clara's words echoed louder than the hum of the cafe around him. Could Lucas really be capable of betrayal? He wanted to dismiss it, chalk it up to misunderstanding or misplaced concern. But there had been something in Clara's voice. Not drama, not doubt, just quiet conviction. "I think I need a bit more time," Ethan said carefully, eyes still on the contract. Lucas tilted his head. "More time." "Ethan, we've combed through every detail for weeks, I know." Ethan replied, steady. "But it's a big move. No harm in one last check." A flicker, barely there, passed across Lucas's face. Was it irritation? A hint of unease? It disappeared so quickly Ethan couldn't be sure. "Of course," Lucas said smoothly, though his smile faltered at the edges. "Whatever you need, but this opportunity, it won't wait forever." "Exactly," Ethan murmured, standing slowly. "That's why I need to be sure." Lucas remained seated, his expression calm. But something had changed. Something subtle, but sharp. An undercurrent. Ethan had never noticed before. Outside, the evening air felt colder than he expected. As he stepped onto the sidewalk, he spotted Clara standing a few feet away, hands clasped tightly in front of her. "You didn't sign?" she asked, eyes searching his face. "No," Ethan said, "but I need more than just suspicion. I need answers." Clara's shoulders dropped, relief softening her features. "I wasn't sure you'd believe me." "Why did you tell me?" Ethan asked quietly. Clara looked down, then met his gaze with quiet honesty. "Because it was wrong. I know I'm just a waitress. But if someone was about to do that to me, I'd want someone to speak up." Her words struck something in him. She had nothing to gain, no reason to lie, and yet she'd risked everything just to warn a stranger. "I appreciate it," he said. "Truly." Clara shifted, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. "I'm just glad you listened." Ethan nodded, but the weight in his chest hadn't lifted. "I'll need proof." He said half to her, half to himself, and I know exactly who to call. As he walked down the block, Ethan pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts. There was one person who could uncover the truth, someone who didn't miss details and didn't ask questions, and if Lucas really was hiding something, they would find it. Ethan stepped away from the curb phone pressed to his ear. The city moved around him, unaware of the war quietly forming behind his eyes. "It's Ethan Ward," he said. Once the call connected, "I need your help. Isaac." Something serious. On the other end, Isaac Bell, a seasoned private investigator Ethan had used discreetly in the past, fell silent for a moment, then asked, "What's going on?" Ethan walked Isaac through everything. Clara's warning, Lucas's strange behavior, and the growing knot of unease that wouldn't let him sleep. "I'll start with his finances," Isaac said. "Give me a couple of days." When the call ended, Ethan leaned against his car, staring up at the cafe's windows. Lucas was still inside, laughing probably, planning, pretending. Ethan drove away, unsure what he hoped Isaac would find. The following days passed like a bad dream. Every conversation with Lucas now felt laced with hidden meanings. He still wore the same confident smile, cracked the same jokes, but Ethan was listening differently now, catching pauses, measuring tones, looking for fractures. He smiled back, pretended waited. Meanwhile, Isaac was combing through records behind the scenes, quiet, thorough, methodical. Ethan trusted very few people with delicate matters. Isaac was one of them. On the third day, the call came. "I've got something," Isaac said. Ethan sat up straight at his desk. "Tell me." "There are transfers. Small but consistent. Lucas has been moving money into an offshore account for the last 6 months, right around when your deal started taking shape." Ethan's jaw tightened. "How much?" "Not millions," Isaac replied, "but enough to raise questions. And the pattern is deliberate. It's not casual, it looks like positioning, getting ready for something. Could it be linked to what Clara overheard? I'd say yes. People don't shift money offshore unless they're hiding something, or preparing to walk away with more than they should." Ethan closed his eyes. The weight of it was real now. It wasn't just a warning from a stranger anymore. It was evidence, faint but undeniable. "Keep going," he said quietly. "I need more than a trail. I need the truth. I'll dig deeper," Isaac said before ending the call. Ethan lowered the phone and stared out his office window. The skyline stretched endlessly, glittering and untouchable, a city built on ambition. How had things come to this? How had the man he trusted most become a question he couldn't answer? Ethan stared out the office window, the city humming below, unaware of the storm that now lived inside him. Lucas had been by his side from the beginning, through 20-hour workdays, late-night failures, and the rare, hard-earned wins. They had toasted victories and weathered storms as brothers in arms. And yet beneath all of it, Lucas had been plotting the quiet movement of funds. The calculated charm. The voice Ethan had trusted now echoed in his mind. Smug, rehearsed, and deadly. He won't see it coming. Had the envy always been there? Had Lucas masked it behind every handshake, every shared dream? That evening they met for dinner, as they always had, a tradition born of habit and camaraderie. But tonight, Ethan saw things differently. Lucas, already seated with his usual effortless grin, looked up as if nothing had changed. To Ethan, everything had. They made small talk. Lucas joked, shared market news, and praised new leads like the future was still theirs to build together. So Lucas said, mid-bite, "Are we still on track to close next week?" Ethan met his gaze. "I'm just reviewing a few final pieces," he said evenly. "Want to be sure it's all aligned?" A flicker passed through Lucas's eyes. Brief, controlled something that might have once been impatience or maybe fear. But the smile returned quickly. "No rush. Just don't want us to miss the window." Ethan nodded, hiding the fire rising in his chest. How could Lucas sit there and lie so easily? How could he talk of timing and teamwork with a knife behind his back? They finished the meal like any other. No accusations, no raised voices, just a quiet unraveling of a friendship. Ethan knew had already ended. That night, sleep never came. Ethan lay awake, staring at the ceiling, Clara's voice looping in his mind. "I couldn't let you walk into it. Blind." She had pulled him back from the edge, but now he had to move carefully. Lucas was a chess player, and Ethan couldn't afford a wrong move. The next morning brought no relief. His chest was heavy, his thoughts restless. Even the routine of coffee and calls felt like noise. By midday, the phone buzzed. Isaac Bell. Ethan answered instantly. "I have more," Isaac said. His voice was low, steady, but urgent. And Ethan knew the truth was coming. "I think we're seeing it now." Isaac's voice came through the receiver, calm but weighty. Ethan straightened in his chair, muscles tense. "What did you find?" Isaac didn't hesitate. "Over the last year, there's been a steady pattern, funds being drawn from the company in small, carefully timed amounts, always just below the threshold that would raise alarms internally." Ethan's breath caught. He's been moving the money into a private offshore account. Isaac continued. More than you thought. How much? Ethan asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. Close to 5 million. Ethan's world tilted. He gripped the edge of his desk to steady himself. $5 million. Not a spontaneous betrayal, a meticulously planned heist that had unfolded quietly for over 12 months. This wasn't opportunistic. Isaac said, it was methodical, intentional. He's been laying this groundwork for a long time. Ethan closed his eyes, his jaw clenched. And then came the second blow. We also found records of communication. Isaac went on, he's been in contact with 2 of your direct competitors. My guess, he's positioning himself to seize full control once you sign. If you had closed that deal, you would have handed him the company without knowing it. The words cut deeper than the numbers ever could. Lucas hadn't just betrayed their friendship, he'd engineered an entire collapse behind Ethan's back. While Ethan shook his hand, Lucas was setting the match. You need to move now. Isaac said, his voice suddenly firm. This isn't a mistake. It's fraud, calculated and deliberate. If you wait, he'll act first. Ethan opened his eyes, rage threatening to overtake him, but rage couldn't lead. Not here. What do we do? He asked, though plans were already forming in his mind. Freeze the accounts, Isaac answered. We've got enough to justify it. Then, confront him. But don't show your cards too early. Make sure he has nowhere to run. I'll contact my legal team right away, Ethan said. We'll lock everything down. I'm sending over everything I've compiled. Isaac said, you'll have what you need. Legally, strategically. The call ended. Ethan sat in silence for a long moment, staring at the ceiling. He had trusted Lucas with everything, the company, the vision, his loyalty. And Lucas had spent a year slowly, silently stealing it all. He reached for his phone and called his attorneys, voice steady now. Within the hour, the wheels were turning. Documents, drafted, accounts, frozen, access revoked. A flicker of relief passed through him. Lucas wouldn't be able to do more damage. But that wasn't the end. The next move had to come face to face, and it had to be smart. Lucas was more than a traitor. He was dangerous and still. He had no idea that Ethan was already ahead of him. That evening, Ethan chose the battleground. A quiet glass-walled office they had used countless times before for strategy meetings, investor calls, and confidential decisions. Neutral ground, clean, deceptively calm. Unlike the storm Ethan carried inside him, Lucas arrived right on time, casual as always. Evening, he said with a grin. I've been thinking we're this close to locking everything in. Feels good, huh? Ethan didn't return the smile. Have a seat. We need to talk. Lucas hesitated, just for a second, then lowered himself into the leather chair across from him. The air shifted heavier now. What's going on? Lucas asked, trying to keep it light. You look like someone just died. Ethan stared across the table, silent for a beat too long. The man sitting there had been his business partner, his friend, nearly a brother. But now he saw him clearly. I know everything. Ethan said at last, voice low but steady. The offshore accounts. The money you pulled. The deals behind my back. All of it. For the first time, Lucas's expression faltered, a flicker of panic quickly replaced by a shrug and a forced laugh. You've lost me. Sounds like someone needs a vacation. I hired someone, Ethan said. A professional, every transaction, every message we have it. You've been planning this for more than a year. Silence fell hard between them. The false charm on Lucas's face slowly drained, leaving behind something colder, sharper. He leaned back. So that's where we are. Yes, Ethan said. Right here. No more lies. Lucas exhaled through his nose, then leaned forward, hands clasped, voice harder now. You want honesty? Fine. I did it. I planned it because you left me no other choice. Ethan's eyes narrowed. What does that mean? You don't get it. Lucas said, bitterness rising. For years, I've done everything behind the scenes, cleaned up the messes, fixed the numbers, held the line. And still, you were always the face, the visionary, the one everyone celebrated. Ethan's jaw clenched. So your solution was theft. Treason. Lucas shook his head. It was taking what I was owed. What I built. You think that spotlight should have only ever been yours. Ethan stared, disbelief turning slowly into rage. All this he said quietly. Because your pride was bruised, Lucas stood now, eyes hard. I carried this company as much as you did. You just had the voice, I had the weight. Ethan rose to meet him, calm but fierce. You could have said something. You could have stepped up. Instead, you chose to burn everything down. Lucas didn't answer, because there was nothing left to say. You were always the one people listened to. Lucas said, voice tight with resentment. I was just the man in the background, invisible unless something broke. Ethan's temper finally cracked. You call that a reason? You siphoned millions, nearly wrecked everything we built, all because you didn't feel seen. I was done waiting. Lucas shot back. You would have kept me in your shadow forever. This deal was my way out, my chance to finally get what I deserved. Ethan rose to his feet, fists clenched. You could have asked for change. Recognition. You could have had a conversation, but you chose betrayal. Lucas sneered. You wouldn't have listened. You never even tried. Ethan said bitterly. I saw you as a partner, a brother, but you saw me as an obstacle. Silence burned between them. Then Ethan delivered the final blow. I've frozen the accounts. Lucas froze. You what I've already spoken with my legal team, Ethan said evenly. The money you moved, it's locked. You can't touch a cent. Real panic crept into Lucas's eyes. He stood sharply. You had no right. This was mine. I worked for it. This was never yours to take. Ethan said, you stole from me, from the company, from everyone who trusted us. Lucas's voice rose in fury. You think this ends here? I have allies. Ethan, people who owe me favors. You don't know who you're crossing. I know exactly who I'm crossing. Ethan replied, and I'm not afraid of any of them. You're done. Lucas. For a brief moment, Lucas looked like a man unraveling the cracks too wide to hide. You'll regret this, he hissed. Ethan met his glare with cold finality. No, I regret trusting you. Lucas turned and stormed out the door, slamming behind him. Ethan stood alone in the echo of the moment. The cost of that confrontation weighed heavy, not just the business, but the loss of someone he once called a friend. He dropped into the nearest chair, pressing his palms to his eyes. The betrayal was real deep. But it was over. A quiet knock interrupted the silence. Clara stepped into the room, her expression cautious. She had been waiting just outside Ethan, she asked softly. He looked up, drained but steady. It's done, he's gone. She crossed the room and sat opposite him, her voice full of compassion. I'm sorry, I should have seen it, he said, voice low. I let him get too close and he used it all against me. Clara gently placed a hand on his arm. You stopped him before it was too late. Ethan sat quietly, exhaling the heaviness that had lived in his chest for days. Because of you, he said softly. Across from him, Clara offered a modest smile. I just did what felt right. For a while, neither spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It was honest. The kind that follows a storm. The road ahead would not be easy. There would be legal consequences, reputation, repair, and business recovery. Lucas's betrayal hadn't just shaken the company, it had shaken Ethan to his core. But for the first time in days, he felt something he hadn't dared to feel: hope, because he wasn't standing alone. The next morning, Ethan sat at his desk, staring at the skyline that had once felt so steady and now seemed changed. Lucas was gone. The plan had been stopped, but the scars ran deep. His thoughts kept circling back to Clara. A young woman with nothing to gain. She had spoken up anyway. and in doing so she had saved everything. He couldn't let that go unnoticed. Ethan picked up the phone and called the cafe where she worked. When the manager answered, he asked for Clara. After a brief pause, he was told she wasn't on shift today. Without hesitating, Ethan grabbed his coat. That afternoon, his car turned off the wide boulevards he knew, weaving into a modest neighborhood of tight lawns and weathered fences. The contrast to his world was stark, but humbling. He parked and walked up the path to a small house that had clearly seen better days. Its charm, though faded, felt genuine. He paused at the door. Strange, he had faced billion-dollar boardrooms, and yet this made him nervous. Then he knocked. The door opened. Clara stood in jeans and a sweater, surprise flickering in her eyes. "Mr. Ward?" she said, confused. "What are you doing here?" Ethan smiled gently. "I wanted to thank you. Properly." She blinked. "You didn't have to come all the way I did," he said, stepping inside as she moved aside to let him through. The house was modest but clean warm, the kind of home built with care, not wealth. He noticed the worn cushions, the scent of tea, the stack of second-hand books on the side table. It felt real. They sat on an old couch in the living room. Clara looked at him, unsure of what came next. "I've been thinking," Ethan began, his voice low. "And the truth is, if you hadn't spoken up, I would have lost everything. You didn't have to get involved. But you did." Clara looked down, flustered. I couldn't let it happen." "You did more than that," Ethan said. "You changed the course of everything." "You're wrong," Ethan said softly, shaking his head. "Most people would have stayed silent. Most wouldn't have said a word. But you spoke up when it mattered." Clara looked away, embarrassed by the praise. "I just did what anyone decent would have done." "No," Ethan replied gently. "You did what was right, and you risked a lot to do it." There was a pause, not awkward but full of something unspoken. "I've been thinking." He continued, his voice steady but kind. "You once mentioned putting school on hold, for your mother." Clara nodded slowly, unsure where he was going. "Well," Ethan said, "I want to help you finish what you started." Her eyes widened, stunned. You mean go back to school?" Ethan nodded. "You told me you love economics, and I can see your instincts are sharp. If you're willing, I'll cover your tuition, and when you're ready, I'd like you to come work for me." Clara stared at him, overwhelmed. "Work for you? You already proved you can see what others miss." Ethan said, "That's the kind of person I want on my team." Emotions swelled behind Clara's eyes. "I don't know what to say, then don't." Ethan replied with a smile. "Just take the chance. You earned this." She blinked back tears, her voice barely above a whisper. "This means more to me than you could ever know." Ethan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Then make the most of it. That's all I ask." Clara nodded still, stunned, her heart racing. "I will, I promise." Ethan stood, the weight on his shoulders finally easing. At the door, he turned back. "My team will contact you with the details, but for now, just take care of your mom. The rest will wait." Clara smiled, her cheeks still damp. "Thank you, Mr. Ward. I won't forget this." Outside, the cool air wrapped around Ethan as he walked to his car. For the first time in weeks, he felt still, not because the chaos had ended, but because something better had begun. It wasn't just about repaying a debt, it was about lifting someone else the way she had lifted him when it mattered most. In the days that followed, both their lives shifted. Clara spent hours thinking about the future, something she hadn't dared to do in years. School had always been just out of reach, abandoned when her mother's illness demanded everything. But now that dream was calling again. Still, uncertainty lingered. She wasn't used to being noticed, to stepping into the light. It thrilled her and terrified her. Meanwhile, Ethan had already spoken with his team. He made sure everything would be in place the moment Clara said yes. He didn't push. He gave her time, but deep down, he already knew her answer. He had seen it in her eyes, that quiet fire. There had always been something in Clara's eyes, a quiet fire, a sense of purpose waiting for its moment. Ethan had seen it from the beginning. 1 week later that moment arrived. He was reviewing contracts in his office when his assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Mr. Ward, Clara Monroe is here to see you." He looked up, heart lifting slightly. "Send her in." The door opened, and Clara stepped in. She looked nervous, but determined. "Clara," Ethan said warmly, rising from his chair. "It's good to see you. Please have a seat." She sat carefully, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "I've been thinking a lot about your offer." She began, her voice steady despite the nerves. "And I've made my decision." Ethan waited, watching her closely. "I'd like to accept," she said, "both the chance to return to school and the position at your company." A smile spread across Ethan's face, proud, but not surprised. "I'm glad," he said. "It's the right choice, and it's yours." Clara exhaled, a weight falling from her chest. "It still feels surreal. I never imagined anything like this. It's a big leap." Ethan agreed. "But you've already shown you have what it takes. You have sharp instincts, a solid understanding of economics, and the courage to speak up when it mattered most. We need voices like yours." Clara gave a small, genuine smile. "Thank you. I really appreciate this opportunity." Ethan leaned forward, his tone sincere. "This isn't charity, Clara. It's belief you've earned this. I meant it when I said I see real potential in you." Emotion flickered in her eyes. Not just gratitude, but something deeper. For the first time in a long while, someone believed in her future. "I won't let you down," she said quietly, but with strength. "I know you won't." Ethan replied, "We'll get started with your school enrollment, and in the meantime, you'll begin orientation with us. You'll have a mentor to help guide you, and I'll be here whenever you need." She nodded, feeling the shift within her. A new chapter was unfolding, one where she was no longer surviving, but building something of her own. As their meeting wrapped, Clara rose from her seat, lighter than when she arrived. At the door, she paused and turned back. "Thank you, Mr. Ward, for believing in me." Ethan smiled. "Welcome to the team." Clara. In the weeks that followed, Clara's life began to change in ways she hadn't imagined. Her first days at the company were overwhelming. Gone were the clatter of dishes and the routine of cafe shifts, now replaced by meetings, strategy sessions, and spreadsheets. But the team welcomed her with open arms. Her mentor, a kind and seasoned executive named Sandra, took her under her wing without hesitation. No question was too small. No mistake was met with judgment. At first, Clara felt out of place, but day by day she learned, she adapted, and slowly she began to thrive. The girl who had once felt invisible was now being seen, not for her past, but for her potential. Clara's days soon fell into a rhythm, structured, challenging, but fulfilling in ways she hadn't felt in years. She arrived early, notebook in hand, ready to absorb everything. Her evenings stretched long, often spent buried in financial statements or piecing together strategy briefs. Her background in economics, though academic and interrupted, blended surprisingly well with the real-world demands of corporate life. And her sharp eye for patterns didn't go unnoticed. Ethan watched quietly from a distance. What began as an act of gratitude was quickly becoming one of his wisest decisions. Clara was no longer the waitress who had once warned him in a cafe. She was becoming an integral part of the company, thoughtful, driven, and unmistakably talented. Behind the scenes, Ethan's legal team continued the grueling process of dismantling the damage Lucas had left behind. The accounts were secure. The offshore assets had been frozen, but the tangle of betrayal took time to unravel. Fortunately, Ethan wasn't doing it alone anymore. One evening, as office lights dimmed and silence settled over the building, Clara was still at her desk. She was reviewing reports for Sandra. eyes scanning column after column, searching for irregularities. She hadn't meant to stay late, but she was learning, growing, and for the first time in years, she felt capable. "You're still here?" a familiar voice asked gently. Clara looked up to find Ethan standing a few steps away, surprise mixed with amusement on his face. "Just wrapping up something for Sandra," she replied with a smile. He chuckled. "Careful. If you keep this up, you'll make the rest of us look bad." Clara grinned. "I don't mind. I actually enjoy it." Ethan leaned against the doorframe, studying her for a moment. "You're doing excellent work, Clara. I hope you know that." The compliment caught her off guard. Pride rose in her chest, quiet but powerful. "Thank you, Mr. Ward. That means a lot." He nodded, then added with a warm smile, "But make sure you take time for yourself too. The work will still be here tomorrow." As he turned to leave, Clara watched him go, heart full. Not because of his position, but because of the trust he had placed in her. Over the following weeks, Clara's presence grew stronger. She tackled each task with quiet focus and relentless dedication. Her mentor, Sandra, became both a guide and a champion, walking her through complex financial models, corporate systems, and team dynamics. "You've got a real gift for this," Sandra said one afternoon as they reviewed a difficult forecast. "It's like you've done this your whole life." Clara smiled, not with arrogance but with gratitude. "I think I'm just finally where I'm supposed to be." Sandra returned the smile. "You belong here, Clara. You don't have to prove that anymore." There was a time when Clara constantly felt like she was catching up, running behind a world that always seemed 3 steps ahead. But now something had shifted. She no longer felt like the girl who didn't belong. She had found her pace. Her insights, rooted in both her academic background and her lived experience, often cut through the noise. During meetings, she offered observations others overlooked, not because she was louder, but because she saw things differently, and Ethan noticed. More and more, he began turning to her, not just to listen, but to ask, to rely on her voice. One afternoon, Clara received a message asking her to stop by his office. She felt a flicker of nerves. Even now, despite their evolving rapport sitting across from Ethan, Ward still carried weight. When she entered, Ethan greeted her with a nod and motioned toward the seat opposite his. "I've been reviewing your work over the past month," he said, leaning back in his chair. "And I'm genuinely impressed." Clara's heart thudded. "Thank you," she said, trying to stay composed. "I've just been doing my best." Ethan gave a small, sincere smile. "You've done far more than that. Your insight has helped us catch issues before they escalated. Your work has made an impact, one that doesn't go unnoticed." Clara's breath caught for a second. She wasn't used to praise like this. "I've been thinking." He continued, more serious now, about how to give you the space to grow. "You're ready for more responsibility." Her eyes widened. "More. I want you to lead a new initiative," he said. "We're preparing to expand into a new market, a major step for the company. I'd like you to head the strategy team." Clara blinked. Ethan nodded. "You'll work directly with me. You'll help build the plan, run the numbers, and oversee the rollout. It's big, but I believe you're ready." She sat still, the weight of the offer sinking in. It was overwhelming, but also electrifying. I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Are you sure I wouldn't ask if I wasn't?" Ethan replied gently. "You've earned this. You're capable, and I trust your judgment." That trust, steady and unwavering, settled the storm inside her. Clara drew in a slow breath and nodded. "Then yes, I'll do it. I won't let you down, I know you won't," he said, smiling. "Take the weekend to rest. Monday we begin." The next few days were a blur of focus and fire. Clara dove into research, teaming up with Sandra to map out the new territory. Together, they analyzed data, studied trends, and started crafting the foundation of what could become a turning point for the company. It was bold, ambitious, and she was leading it. What once would have scared her now felt like purpose. She was ready. The expansion project was bold, a leap into international markets that promised tremendous growth, but not without its share of risk. Regulations, cultural nuances, and financial volatility painted a complex picture, yet Clara didn't flinch. She leaned in. Every day was a puzzle, and every piece she connected gave her more clarity, not just about global strategy, but about herself. With Ethan's mentorship and Sandra's support, she was navigating a world she'd once only read about in conference rooms and strategic briefings. Ethan increasingly looked to Clara. Her voice, once hesitant, now carried weight. Their dynamic had shifted, no longer mentor and trainee, but partners in vision. One evening, after a marathon of meetings, Ethan pulled Clara aside. The office was quiet, bathed in the soft gold of the setting sun. They stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city skyline stretching endlessly before them. "I've been meaning to say something." Ethan began, his tone gentler than usual. Clara turned curiosity in her gaze. "These last few months? Everything we've faced, from Lucas's betrayal to the momentum of this project, I couldn't have done it without you." She blinked, surprised. "I've just been doing my job." Ethan shook his head. "No, you've done more than a job. You've led with clarity, courage, and integrity. That's rare, and I see it." The sincerity in his words landed deep. Clara had never imagined standing here, not just employed, but trusted, valued. "Thank you," she said softly. "That means more than I can say. I'm excited about what's ahead." Ethan replied, his voice steady with belief. "Together, we've only just begun." They stood in silence, watching the sun dip behind the high-rises, a quiet promise of the future they were building. The project under Clara's leadership moved quickly. The company was gaining traction in foreign markets, and their strategy was being noticed. Ethan felt the tide turning, the kind of momentum that once felt impossible in the shadow of betrayal. But success, as always, drew shadows. One morning, Ethan arrived at the office to find a uniformed security officer waiting near his door. "Mr. Ward," the man said quietly, "this was delivered early today. No return address." He handed over a plain envelope, Ethan's name handwritten neatly across the front. It was heavier than expected. Inside, a single flash drive. Ethan stared at it, silent. "What's on this?" he asked. The officer shook his head. "No idea, sir." But it was marked urgent. A chill moved through him. After months of silence, Lucas's presence loomed again, and this time it had arrived uninvited. It had been several months since Lucas Hale had tried to dismantle everything Ethan Ward had built. Since then, Ethan had moved forward, rebuilding the company's trust, investing in his team, and stepping into a future that no longer included betrayal. The legal proceedings were still crawling forward, but in Ethan's mind, Lucas was done. Silenced until that morning. A plain envelope with his name on it, a flash drive inside, no sender. He had felt the chill before he even opened it. "Thank you," Ethan murmured to the security officer who had delivered it. Once alone in his office, he locked the door behind him and approached his desk with a sense of unease growing in his chest. He hesitated. Call Julian now, or see for himself first. After a long breath, Ethan inserted the drive into his computer. A single video file waited. He clicked. The screen flickered, and a grainy image appeared. Lucas seated in a dimly lit room wearing the smug expression Ethan knew too well. Ethan Lucas began leaning casually in his chair. "By now you probably think you've won. You froze my accounts, cut me off, erased me." A pause, then a smirk. "But here's the thing, you didn't end me. Not even close." Ethan's jaw clenched. Lucas' continued, voice dripping with venom. "While you've been polishing your empire, I've been busy. I've been watching, listening, gathering." He leaned forward, eyes cold. "I've made friends. Powerful ones, and they're not all from the boardroom. When the right people hear what I've found, well, let's just say your clean image won't stay so clean. The screen went black. Ethan sat frozen, the silence pressing in around him like a closing fist. He had spent years ensuring every part of his business was transparent, ethical above reproach, but he knew one truth: reputation doesn't need facts to crumble just enough noise. Whatever Lucas was threatening, it didn't have to be real to be dangerous. Ethan grabbed his phone and dialed. "Julian," he said, as soon as the line picked up, "we've got a situation." "What kind?" Julian's voice sharpened instantly. "A flash drive, no return address, a video. Lucas, he's threatening to leak something to the media, says he's got connections." There was a pause, and then Julian's tone shifted from concern to control. "First, send me the file. I'll have my team review every frame. We'll check for background identifiers, metadata, location, clues, anything." "Already on it," Ethan replied, hitting send on the email. In the meantime, Julian continued, calm but firm. "Do not engage with him. He wants to shake you, to bait you. We respond on our terms, not his." Ethan nodded slowly, staring at the empty screen. The past had just come knocking again. And this time, it wasn't after money. It was after everything. The calmer we are, the clearer we see. Julian had said, "Lucas wants chaos. Don't give it to him." As Ethan ended the call and sent over the video file, he tried to slow his breathing. The weight pressing on his chest wasn't fear, it was fury. Lucas wasn't just out for revenge, he wanted to destroy him, and he was willing to drag everything into the fire to do it. The hours that followed blurred into one long strategy session. Ethan coordinated with his legal team, Julian's investigators, and his communications director. Every angle covered every possible leak anticipated. But none of them knew what Lucas had or whether it even existed. That was the hardest part. Uncertainty. That night, as city lights flickered outside his window, a soft knock pulled him from his spiral. Clara stepped in quietly. "I heard something's going on." Ethan nodded, rubbing the back of his neck. "It's Lucas. He's resurfaced. Claims he has something on me, something he's planning to leak." Clara's expression turned to worry. "I thought he was gone." "So did I," Ethan muttered. She moved to the seat across from him, her presence grounding. "What can I do?" Ethan met her eyes, seeing the unwavering loyalty there. "Keep doing what you're doing, and if this explodes, I may need you more than ever." Clara nodded without hesitation. "You'll have me, no matter what." A faint smile tugged at his lips. "Thank you. Truly." She left as quietly as she came. Ethan stayed behind, staring out into the darkness. Lucas wanted to rattle him, to make him crack. But he wasn't the same man he was months ago. Not anymore. In the days that followed, tension gripped the office like static in the air. Every morning, Ethan scanned the headlines. Every silence from the media felt like a countdown. He couldn't hear. Lucas had vanished again. But his threat hovered like a storm cloud just out of sight, but always there. Julian and his team worked around the clock. They traced the video's origin to a rundown hotel on the city's edge, but Lucas was long gone. He was moving fast, staying hidden, and clearly aware that he was being hunted. Clara, steady as always, kept the business running, but she saw the strain in Ethan's shoulders in the way he barely touched his morning coffee anymore. Then late one evening, Ethan's phone buzzed. It was Julian. "We've got something." Ethan sat up, pulse quickening. He slipped. Julian continued. "One of our guys intercepted a message. He's been contacting a journalist. He's trying to sell a story about you." And Ethan asked already. Bracing, Julian's voice steadied. "It's all fabricated. Every word. He's desperate." Julian said, his voice low but steady. "He's throwing half-truths into a blender, mixing in bold-faced lies. It's a last-ditch attempt." Ethan closed his eyes for a moment. Relief. Rage. It all swirled together. "So none of it's real?" he asked. "Not even close." Julian confirmed. He's accusing you of shady deals with overseas companies funneling profits through offshore accounts. Classic misdirection, but it's all smoke, no substance. Ethan exhaled slowly. His stomach, knotted for days, finally began to unclench. Can we stop him? We already are, Julian replied. My team's contacted the media outlets he approached. We're feeding them. The real story backed by documents, the embezzlement, the betrayal, the offshore transfers he made. Once it's out, anything Lucas says will collapse under its own weight. Ethan nodded, grounding himself. And legally. That's the other good news. With everything we've collected, the accounts, the paper trail, this attempted smear, we have a case strong enough to bury him. Defamation fraud, breach of fiduciary duty. Your legal team's ready. Ethan sat back, eyes on the ceiling. It's ending, he whispered. Finally. That night, in a quiet conference room with his attorneys, Ethan signed the final set of legal documents they would file in the morning. It wasn't just retaliation, it was justice. Lucas had twisted the truth stolen from people who trusted him and tried to burn down what they had built. Now, he would answer for it. At sunrise, the story broke. News alerts lit up every screen. Corporate betrayal exposed. Lucas Hale under fire. The press release from Ethan's legal team laid it bare: the theft, the manipulation, the attempt to frame Ethan for crimes Lucas had committed himself. By midday, headlines painted a clear villain: Lucas Hale, not the man who was betrayed, but the man who betrayed. In his office, Ethan sat by the window watching the city pulse with life as the world finally saw the truth. The knock on the door was soft. Clara stepped in her eyes, scanning his face. I saw the coverage, she said gently. It's finally out. Ethan nodded, not taking his eyes off the skyline. The worst is behind us. Clara walked over, standing beside his desk. You've been through so much, but you didn't let it break you. He turned to her, the weight in his eyes softening. I wouldn't have made it without you. The storm had passed. For the first time in months, Ethan allowed himself to breathe, without the weight of betrayal shadowing every thought. Lucas was no longer a threat. His schemes unraveled, his voice silenced by truth. And standing beside Ethan through every tremor had been Clara. You didn't just help me survive this, Ethan said softly as they stood in the quiet of his office. You've been my anchor. My constant. Clara offered a small smile, one that reached her eyes. You've been there for me too. I guess we kept each other steady. Their silence was no longer heavy. It was filled with understanding, with a quiet sense of victory that didn't need to be spoken aloud. We've come a long way, Ethan murmured. Clara nodded. And there's still so much ahead. He extended a hand palm open. Then let's get back to it. Together. She took his hand, firm and certain. Together. Weeks later, the company hummed with new life. With Lucas gone and his influence erased, stability returned. Investors regained confidence, the press had moved on, and the team had rallied behind a renewed vision. At the heart of it all was Clara, whose leadership during the international expansion had earned quiet admiration across departments. No longer just the sharp mind in the corner of a strategy meeting, she was now someone the entire company looked to. One afternoon, after she wrapped up a presentation with the global team, a message awaited her. Ethan wanted to see her. She entered his office, still not fully accustomed to how far she'd come. You asked for me, she said with a gentle smile. Ethan leaned back in his chair, thoughtful. I've been reflecting, he said, on everything we've faced, and I realized, thank you, doesn't begin to cover it. Clara tilted her head, slightly curious. You've already given me more than I could have imagined. I never expected anything. And that's exactly why you deserve more. Ethan replied, his voice quiet but resolute. You've led with integrity, insight, and heart. Not once did you ask for recognition. You simply showed up and gave your best. Clara's breath caught as Ethan continued. I want you to take a permanent seat at the table. I'm offering you an executive role, head of international strategy. You've earned it in every possible way. She stared at him, stunned. You mean, as part of the senior team? I mean, as a leader, Ethan said. Because that's what you are. For a long moment, Clara said nothing. Then she nodded, her voice steady with emotion. I'll do it, and I'll give it everything I've got. Ethan smiled. I'd expect nothing less. As she left his office, the city stretched before her through the tall glass windows, no longer a horizon of limits, but one of possibilities. And for the first time in her life, Clara wasn't just stepping into a role, she was stepping into her future. Clara sat in quiet disbelief, her hands folded in her lap as Ethan finished speaking. I want you to take the position permanently, he said. Director of Global Strategy. You've earned it more than anyone I know. The room seemed to still. 1,000 memories flooded Clara's mind. The cafe, the overheard phone call, the trembling decision to speak up. She had never imagined any of this, that a single act of courage could carry her here. Her voice faltered before she found it again. I don't have words. I never thought I'd be given a chance like this. Ethan's smile was steady. This isn't about chance. You've led. You've lifted this company. You didn't wait to be seen. You proved your place here, and we're better because of it. Clara blinked away the sting of tears. Thank you, she whispered. I'll give it everything I've got. I know you will, Ethan replied, and you won't be doing it alone. We'll keep building this together. As Clara stood, Ethan added, Oh, and one more thing. We're having a company celebration next week. I'd like to make the announcement then. Let everyone know who's helping, lead us into the future. Clara's breath caught in her throat. She had always stayed in the background, content to do the work without the spotlight. But now it was her name that would be called. Her work that would be honored. I'd be honored, she said softly, but with growing confidence. Ethan extended his hand. Then it settled. Welcome to the leadership team. Clara. She took his hand, smiling through glassy eyes. Thank you for believing in me. The celebration arrived sooner than expected. Held in a grand ballroom lit with soft gold light, the evening buzzed with energy. Laughter and champagne flutes filled the air, a stark contrast to the tension that had gripped the company only months before. The team had weathered the storm, and tonight they celebrated the dawn. Ethan took the stage, commanding the attention of every table in the room. We've faced a season of trials, he began, but we faced them together. And because of that, we didn't just survive, we grew. Clara stood near the back, her hands gently clasped, heart thudding in her chest. And there's someone I need to thank. Ethan, said his voice resonating through the room. Someone who reminded us all that doing what's right is never out of reach. That courage can come from unexpected places, and that brilliance shines brightest when paired with humility. He turned toward Clara. Clara Bennett. Would you please join me on stage? Applause erupted. Clara's breath caught. She moved forward slowly, her steps sure, but filled with awe. She remembered scrubbing cafe counters just months ago, invisible in a world too loud to listen. Now every eye in the room was on her. Ethan continued as she reached him. Clara has led our international expansion project with extraordinary insight, clarity, and heart. Today I'm proud to welcome her as our new Director of Global Strategy. The room thundered with applause once more. Clara smiled, tears pooling in the corners of her eyes. She glanced out across the sea of faces, colleagues, mentors, people she once feared would never see her. They saw her now. And in that moment, under soft lights and rising applause, she didn't feel like the girl who'd once just warned a stranger. She felt like a leader. As Clara stood beneath the warm lights, the applause slowly faded into a hush. She glanced down at the microphone in her hand, then lifted her gaze to the room, the faces of those who had watched her grow and grown with her. I don't take this moment lightly, she began, her voice clear, though her chest was tight with emotion. 6 months ago, I was just a voice no one expected to hear, but someone listened. And because of that, everything changed. She paused, searching for Ethan in the crowd. He stood near the stage, a quiet presence, the same calm strength that had steadied her through every uncertain step. I'm standing here today because someone believed in me when they didn't have to. Because a team welcomed me, challenged me, and lifted me when I doubted myself. A flicker of a smile crossed her lips. I don't see this as an ending, she said, but a beginning, and I promise I will give everything I have to honor this trust and to help us build something even greater together. Applause swelled once more, this time warmer, deeper. It wasn't just a celebration, it was an embrace. The weeks that followed were a quiet storm of progress. Clara stepped into her role with the same fire that had once driven her to speak up in a quiet cafe. But now she wasn't alone. With Ethan as a mentor and the full support of her team, she moved through each challenge with growing confidence. Late one evening, long after most of the office had emptied out, Clara walked the familiar corridor lined with glass and soft light. Her heels echoed faintly on the polished floor as she reached the window overlooking the city skyline. She stood there for a long while. Below, the city pulsed with life. Somewhere in those streets was the version of her that had once doubted she'd ever be more than a quiet observer. But up here, in this moment, she had become something she never dared to dream of. A leader, a voice, a light for others. Clara Bennett, once just a name on a cafe schedule, was now shaping the future of a company, and perhaps something even more. She smiled to herself, whispering into the silence, "This is just the beginning." And it was. From a modest cafe to the highest ranks of corporate leadership, Clara's journey was never about luck. It was about courage, integrity, and standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. And David. He didn't just save his company. He rediscovered what truly mattered: trust, loyalty, and the power of believing in someone when they least expect it. In a world driven by power and ambition, this story reminds us that true strength often comes from quiet places, and one voice can change everything. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that good people still exist and that redemption is always possible, please like, share, and subscribe to Shining Stories for more powerful, real, and human tales like this one. Thank you for watching. Until next time, keep believing in the good